this baguette is how Ronald Reagan stopped communism.
Basically.
Cool. I vibe with that. So Ronald Reagan, honor. How did he kind of show that? One of the things I always think of was when he was an actor before he became president. He was president of the Screen Actors Guild, vice president before then. And one of the things he had to deal with a ton was in the 40s and 50s, there were all these kind of labor strikes going on in Hollywood, but also they had like a really big threat of communism kind of happening at the same time too.
Yeah, and one of the big issues was that there were rival screen acting guilds. So there was the Screen Actors Guild that Ronnie was a part of, and then there was CSU, which was another guild, and they were throwing like violent protests at the Warner Brothers studio. And so what Reagan decided to do, because he was really worried about CSU being backed by the Soviets, is he brought his people in and like basically counter-picketed, and then also just went in and broke the strike and was able to like push them out of these protests.
Tore down the wall,
and basically, yes, he tore down the communist wall in the movie industry to make sure that it stayed in the hands of the right people.
Yeah. So not only does he get promoted to president of the Screen Actors Guild after that, but Congress notices and brings him in to the House committee meeting on kind of stopping the spread of communism. And is sort of even a moderating force in that age of like McCarthyism and the like rampant fear of communism. It kind of brings a moderate tone that has experience and actually standing up to things that our country was very much against, but also doing it in a way that was successful and actually preserved the integrity of the institution that he was representing, because then Hollywood goes on to continue their strong legacy of creating great art and being politically unaffiliated.
Yeah, I mean, I think that speaks a lot to what honor is. You know, this idea that you have to fulfill your duties, even if it costs you a lot, even if it the narrative around what you're doing might be negative and people may be saying terrible things about you. You have a duty, you have responsibility to live an honorable life, to live up to these values and ideals that are set for us. And sometimes it's not going to be popular. Sometimes people are going to look at you and say that what you're doing is unpopular, what you're doing is not being helpful and being divisive. But what you really need to do is check the end goal and see that is what you're going for. And if it is, if it's really worth it, then you need to keep going. And honor is that pursuit of constantly pushing forward. That was really only the start of his political career. He started as a Democrat, but at least we all know, he eventually became a Republican.
Yeah, no, he actually voted for Harry Truman and called FDR a true hero of his in his earlier days. But then in the 50s, he actually voted for Eisenhower for both of his elections. And then in 1962 officially became a Republican, and then in 1964 actually was a big advocate in Barry Goldwater's campaign, and actually gave one of the most famous speeches that kind of really put him on the scene politically, which was the time for choosing. Started moving into more conservative politics, and eventually, a few years later became the governor of California, and then, as we all know, eventually moved on to the presidency a decade and a half later.
That's a big switch.
Yeah, and I think something that is a testament to the genuine nature of that change is that happened over decades. Yeah. And people don't have the take on that it's he's riding some sort of political wave, because someone will say that sort of thing about Donald Trump in the primaries and say, where's this change from all of a sudden? People were skeptical about that.
Yeah.
But as Reagan switched, that was decades of consideration where he's genuinely advocating for Harry Truman, FDR, an ally to them, and then reconsiders his position based on life experiences with the CSU and thinking about the greater context of what is central planning as it pertains to an American society.
Well, where I see honor in that is, we define it in the House, is it's calculating the cost and it's doing what's wise and required. It wasn't just, like you were saying, a random flip-flop, but it was him realizing if this is so core to who I am, it has to be based on truth. And if what I see as true is shifting, even if I've been such a public spokesperson for someone of that type of Democratic Party and was going to make such a public switch, the honorable thing wasn't to just hide behind the past views that he had held. It was to actually move forward and say, hey, I think I was wrong, and then move forward from that. Because now we have this age where basically people are accused of being wrong if they flip-flop, even if it's an actual kind of change of heart from Reagan. But he didn't back down from that because he saw honor as kind of linked to that commitment to the truth.
Yeah.
And I think we see that even later in his presidency with his willingness to compromise and to work with people if
Yeah.
they were showing him that what they were talking about was true and that it was done in good intentions. And so he was steadfast in what he believed, but he was also willing to work with others and to make sure that he was doing what was right and required in the times that were happening. I think another example of what it means to live a life of honor is exemplified by how you treat your friends. And I think Reagan's relationship with Thatcher, I think, is an amazing example of this. Thatcher did a lot of great things. There's a reason she's a namesake of kings, but she also had a lot of stuff going on in England, in the UK, that was not going so great for her. She faced a vote of no confidence during her time as prime minister, and she also had to deal with the Falklands War.
And it's not like it was the best use of girl power to fund illegal paramilitary death squads in Northern Ireland. Like, there's a lot going on there that Reagan doesn't want to be involved with, and he sticks through it because he's committed to a loving friendship with Margaret Thatcher. And I think that pretty much exemplifies exactly how we have to approach Reagan, where we recognize that there's bad things, as the Iran-Contra scandal. There's like the fact that he completely fumbled on the AIDS crisis that went on. He contributed to the rising population of incarcerated people in the United States. Like, there's a lot going on there, but honor is honest. And what the result of that is you look at those remarkable broken persons and you take those both equally, but you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. The end.
Cut.
Thanks.
We did it. Nobody laughed at it.